3 days before my daughter's engagement party, I walked into Glynis Fowler's alterations shop on Maple Avenue, the same way I had walked in for 22 years, expecting to pick up a dress, pay the invoice, and be back at my desk before noon. I didn't make it back to my desk that day. The bell above the door chimed when I stepped inside. The shop smelled like lavender spray starch and warm cedar, the way it always did. Glynis had been altering my clothes since 1999. Back when Morris was still alive, and Marjorie's Catering was still a small operation running out of a rented commercial kitchen on the south side of Nashville. She'd hemmed business suits and let out seams and taken in dresses when the stress weight fell off me and put them back when life leveled again. She knew my measurements by heart. She appeared from behind a curtain at the far end of the shop, and I knew immediately something was wrong. Glynis was a steady woman, 67 years old, silver braids pinned close to her head, hands that never trembled. Today those hands were gripping the edge of the curtain like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Close the door," she said, barely above a whisper. "Lock it." "Glynis, what?" "Please." Her eyes moved toward the back wall. "Just lock it." I turned the deadbolt. Before I could ask anything else, she crossed the shop in 3 quick strides, took my elbow, and pulled me through the curtain and into the narrow storeroom behind it. Bolts of fabric on metal shelving, the smell of mothballs and cedar boards, one bare bulb overhead, which she immediately switched off. The room went dark, except for a thin thread of light along the baseboard, coming through from the other side of the wall. "Listen," Glynis whispered. Her hand found mine in the dark and held it. "Don't make a sound." I heard voices, 2 men close, separated from us by nothing but drywall and about 4 inches of insulation. The first voice was smooth, unhurried. I recognized it in under 2 seconds. My daughter's fiancé. "Prescott filed the report Tuesday," he said. "Valuation shows 1.2. A second voice, older, more careful. "And the real number?" 7, give or take. But she hasn't looked at the financials herself in months. Not since I took over the vendor accounts. A pause, the sound of something, a briefcase, a folder, being set on a table. "And Anita?" "Anita's going to hand her mother the transition agreement at the party Saturday. She thinks it's an estate planning document, a formality. She's been telling her mother for 2 years the business needs a succession plan. This just looks like one. What if the mother reads the fine print?" A short, confident laugh. "She trusts my daughter completely. If my daughter hands it to her and says it's routine, she'll sign it. That's the whole point." The second man again. "Timeline after that?" "Transfer. Executes within 72 hours. Redfield Holdings takes the assets. Prescott liquidates the client contracts over 90 days. My share clears the judgment and puts about 400 above that in my pocket. And the woman ends up with $840,000, based on the valuation she doesn't know is fraudulent." A pause. "She'll think she got a fair deal." Chairs scraped, footsteps. A door opened and closed, and the voices disappeared. Glynis turned the light back on. Her eyes were wet. She had been crying in the dark without making a sound. "They were here last Wednesday, too," she whispered. "Same room, same conversation, different details." She looked at me. I kept telling myself maybe I'd misheard. Maybe it was something else. She pressed her lips together. But I thought, if it were me, I'd want to know. I stood in that storeroom looking at the baseboards, looking at my own hands. "Where's my dress?" I said finally. She blinked. "What?" "The blue linen. You called Monday to say it was ready." She went through the curtain and came back with a garment bag. I took it, looped it over my arm, and walked to the front door. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I looked back at her, this woman who had known me for 22 years, who had hemmed dresses through loss and rebuilding and all the slow, invisible accumulation of a life, who had just kept me from signing away everything Morris and I built together. "I don't know yet," I said. I walked out into the September heat. My car was 3 spaces down. I laid the dress across the back seat. I got in and closed the door. The street outside was ordinary. A hardware store, a lunch counter, a woman pushing a stroller. Everyone looked like nothing had happened. I sat there for a long time and let the truth settle over me. My daughter's fiancé was going to steal my company. He was going to use my daughter to do it, and I had 48 hours to stop him. 12 years ago, Morris died. Pancreatic cancer, 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end. He was 58. We had been married for 29 years. Our daughter had just turned 23, home from Vanderbilt for the summer, and I had stood at his grave with her hand in mine and made a promise neither of us said out loud. The company was fragile then, 8 employees. A good reputation in the wedding market, but not much cushion. When Morris died, 3 of our best clients sent condolence cards and termination letters in the same week. Everyone told me to sell, I didn't. I learned to read a balance sheet. I drove to every client meeting myself. I hired Floyd Mackey back, our operations manager who had left for a competitor, and together we rebuilt it from the inside. By the time my daughter joined after her MBA program, we had 40 employees and revenue approaching $3 million. By last year, we were at 7. She was good. She had Morris's patience for detail and my stubbornness, which is a difficult combination, but a useful one in business. She worked her way up. She insisted on it. No title she hadn't earned. No authority she hadn't demonstrated. I was proud of her in the particular way you're proud of someone when you also sometimes forget to say so. Troy Bassett arrived 18 months ago. A regional hospitality consultant, impeccable references, the kind of handshake that makes you think you've met someone capable. My daughter introduced him at a quarterly meeting. I hired him on a trial basis. By month 4, he was managing our vendor partnerships. By month 6, he was, and my daughter were together. By month 8, he was suggesting, gently and regularly, that I was working too hard. Looking back, I can see the architecture of it, the way he learned what I was proud of and used it, the way he identified the distance between my daughter and me. Real distance. Distance I had contributed to, and built his leverage there. I didn't see it then. I saw a man who seemed capable, and who made my daughter happy, and who sometimes said things about succession planning that I was too busy to follow up on. I started the engine. By the time I got home, I had made 3 decisions. I would not confront anyone until I had proof. I would call my attorney before the day was out. I would say nothing to my daughter until I understood exactly what she knew. Tamara Gaines picked up on the second ring. I had been using her for business contracts and employment law for 11 years. She was calm in the way of someone who has seen enough corporate fraud to stop being surprised by it. I told her everything. The voices through the wall, the transition agreement, the valuation report, the names Prescott and Redfield Holdings. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then, "Come to my office tomorrow morning at 8. Don't say anything to anyone." A pause, "And I'm going to make a call tonight." His name was Slade Corrigan, former IRS criminal investigation, retired under complicated circumstances that Tamara described only as jurisdictional. He worked private financial fraud cases now, and he had the manner of a man with something to prove and the patience to do it right. He met me at a diner off the interstate at 9 that night. He drank his coffee black. He wrote on paper, "No phone on the table." I told him what I'd heard through the wall. He asked 4 questions, each one specific enough to tell me he already knew which threads to pull. Then he said, "I need until morning. What's the documented value on your company?" 7.2, independent appraisal from 18 months ago. He wrote it down, the judgment against him. "You mentioned it?" He said $380,000. "I don't know more than that." He closed his notebook and left $40 on the table. "Go home. Try to sleep." I didn't sleep, but I went home. Minnie Dade was waiting in my kitchen with the lights on and her good coat still buttoned. She had been my office manager for 16 years. 59 years old, meticulous. The kind of person who remembered every birthday and never missed an invoice discrepancy. She had a key to my house because that's what 16 years of trust looks like when you're not paying attention. She had been carrying something for 2 weeks. She looked like it. She'd been working late, she said. She'd walked past the conference room. The door was half open. My daughter's fiancé was on his phone, and he'd said, and she repeated it carefully, the way people repeat things they've turned over too many times. The old woman has no idea what's happening under her own roof. She'd talked herself out of saying anything, thought maybe she'd misheard, thought it wasn't her place. It is always your place, I told her. Her eyes went bright. I'm sorry, Marjorie. I should have come to you the same night. I told her I needed her help tomorrow. She said she'd already made a fresh pot. At 8 the next morning, Tamara spread 3 folders across her conference table. Floyd Mackey was beside me. I'd called him at midnight. He'd been suspecting something was wrong with the vendor accounts for months. He hadn't had enough to bring to me. He sat with his hands very still and his jaw tight. Tamara opened the first folder. The civil judgment was real. $378,000 awarded in April to a former employer in Atlanta. My daughter's fiancé had been diverting client referrals to a personal side account during his previous position. He'd been dismissed, sued, and lost. The judgment was due within 60 days. Floyd exhaled slowly beside me. The second folder. Over 8 months, 9 of our regional accounts had declined to renew. Ordinary termination language in each one. 3 of them had signed with a company called Greenleaf Event Solutions within 30 days of leaving us. Slade had pulled the incorporation records for Greenleaf. It was registered in Delaware, operating in Tennessee, and owned by my daughter's fiancé's cousin. Floyd pressed his fist to the table. He had flagged those accounts. He had raised it once, in a meeting, and been told the market was softening. I should have pushed harder, he said quietly. You didn't have this, I said. The third folder was the one that made the room go silent. Prescott Alderman, licensed financial consultant out of Brentwood, had prepared a valuation report on Marjorie's catering and events 3 weeks prior. The report valued the company at $1.2 million. It cited stagnating revenue and operational inefficiencies across 4 years. The figures were fabricated. Slade had gone through every line. The revenue numbers cited were not ours. The client attrition rate was nearly triple our actual figure. Overhead was inflated by close to 40%. The transition agreement my daughter was planning to hand me at her own engagement party contained a buyout clause. At the fraudulent valuation, I would receive approximately $840,000 for a company worth more than $7 million. The rest would disappear into Redfield Holdings. I walked to the window. Nashville in September, leaves beginning to turn. A coffee shop across the street with a line out the door. Morris had done the early bookkeeping on a legal pad at our kitchen table. I had done scheduling on a whiteboard in the garage. We had fed people at 2,000 events and built something that I believed was real and permanent, something that would outlast both of us. I turned back to the room. Saturday night, I said. The party is Saturday. Tamara nodded. The injunction can be ready. All transfers frozen the moment you give the word. And my daughter, I said. Slade answered first. She signed Redfield's incorporation documents as a co-founder, but they were misrepresented to her. The question is how much she understood about what she was signing. I looked at the table, at Morris's old company reduced to 3 folders. I need to know before Saturday, I said. The engagement party was held at Oleander, a private dining room on the east side of the city. 40 guests, family, close friends, a few business colleagues. Round tables with white candles and flower arrangements. A bar along one wall. I wore the blue linen. I sat through dinner with my daughter on my left and her fiancé on my right. He touched my arm twice. Said I seemed quiet. Said big milestones could be emotional. Wasn't it something, watching them together? I smiled. At 8:15, the MC tapped a glass. The mother of the bride-to-be would like to say a few words. I stood. I had two versions of a speech. The first was the one I had written 3 months ago. Stories about my daughter's childhood. Something about her father, the kind of toast that makes grown adults pretend something got in their eye. I looked at my daughter. Her face was soft and open and expectant. I set the note cards down. 22 years ago, I said, Morris and I made Sunday dinner for 8 people in our backyard. Nobody hired us. We just made too much food and invited the neighbors. A few smiles around the room, and I realized the only thing I had ever truly wanted to do was feed people. Make a table where they could sit down and feel like they were home. My daughter was watching me. Her fiancé's hand rested on her shoulder. Building this company taught me everything I know about trust, I said. I paused. It also taught me that trust, when it is misplaced, is the most expensive thing you can lose. The room went still. I looked toward the back of the dining room and nodded once. Floyd was standing near the door beside a small projector that had been set up during cocktail hour as part of a photo slideshow. He pressed a button. The screen behind me filled with a document. It was the Prescott Alderman valuation report. Beside it, in a clean second column, was the real independent appraisal, our actual figures, line by line, prepared in the past 48 hours by a firm with no connection to anyone in the room. This is a financial valuation report prepared 3 weeks ago, I said. It claims my company is worth $1.2 million. Our actual appraised value is $7.2 million. The room shifted. Someone at the far table leaned forward. My daughter's fiancé went perfectly still. The document my daughter was planning to ask me to sign tonight contains a buyout clause based on the fraudulent number. Had I signed it, I would have received less than 12% of what this company is worth. The remainder would have transferred to a holding entity controlled by the man sitting beside my daughter. My daughter's face drained of color. That is not. He stood up, his chair scraping back. That's taken completely out of context. The structure is more complicated than. Sit down. He didn't sit. I have the Redfield Holdings Incorporation documents. I have 8 months of client contracts diverted to a company owned by your cousin. I have wire records. I have the civil judgment for $378,000 that is now 37 days from collection. I looked at him steadily. Sit down. He sat. I clicked the remote. The next slide showed the 9 diverted accounts, the timeline, the amounts, the Greenleaf Incorporation. At table 6, the Hendersons, one of those 9 accounts, looked at each other, then at him. I didn't read every document. The room understood. I am not standing here to destroy an engagement, I said. I am standing here because the people at these tables have known me for years. They deserve to know who they are celebrating. My daughter rose from her chair. She was shaking. Mom, I swear I didn't know it was a buyout. He said it was a transition plan. He said you needed support, that the company was getting to be too much, that this was how families protected their legacy. Her voice cracked. I didn't know what I was signing. I know, sweetheart. Shut up, her fiancé grabbed her arm. 2 men near the wall moved quickly, plain clothes, badges. They had been seated as guests since 7 o'clock. The detective stated the charges clearly: wire fraud, fraudulent misrepresentation, tortious interference with business contracts, civil conspiracy. My daughter's fiancé said nothing further. He looked at her once before they walked him out, and whatever he was looking for on her face, he did not find it. Prescott Alderman was escorted from table 4 by a second officer. He had attended as a guest, introduced as a family friend. He went quietly without a word, which told me everything about men who do their damage slowly and carefully and from a distance. My daughter sat down hard into her chair. I came off the small platform and crossed to her. She was bent forward with her hands covering her face. When I put my hand on her back, she didn't move for a long time. "I knew something was wrong," she said finally, not lifting her head. "I brought it to you once, in July. The vendor numbers. And you said you trusted my judgment and to check with Floyd, and then you were back on your call." I sat down beside her. "And I checked with Floyd, and he didn't have answers yet, and Troy had an explanation, and I just—" She pressed her hands harder against her face. "I let him explain it away because I couldn't stand the idea of blowing everything up. I couldn't stand the idea of being wrong about him, or being the one who made everything harder." "I know. I wanted to be the one who helped you," she said. "He told me you were getting tired, that you needed someone to step in, that I could finally be the one who took care of things, instead of always being the one you were taking care of." She looked up at me. Her face was wrecked and completely honest. "And I was so hungry to hear that, Mom. I was so hungry for it that I let him use it." I didn't say anything for a moment. "I needed you to step in," I said. "I just wasn't very good at saying so." She looked at me. "I looked up from the work 1,000 times," I said, "and I thought you didn't need me anymore. I called that independence. You called it something else. I just wanted you to look at me the way you looked at the company. I looked at you that way every single day," I said quietly. "I'm sorry you couldn't see it. That's on me." The guests cleared out by 9:30. Floyd stayed. Minnie came. She had driven over after her dinner in her good coat and stood near the window without being asked. Tamara confirmed the injunction was in full effect. The accounts were frozen, the assets were secure. My daughter sat by the window long after the candles burned down, the parking lot light coming gray and steady through the glass. I sat with her until she was ready to stand. 6 months passed. Her fiancé pled guilty in January. Wire fraud, misrepresentation, civil conspiracy. 18 months federal, 2 years probation, full restitution ordered. His cousin's company was dissolved by court order in February. Prescott Alderman surrendered his license to the state board in November and spent the winter settling 3 civil suits. My daughter moved to Atlanta in October. Small apartment, good neighborhood, a position at a hospitality management group where she started at the bottom and told me plainly she needed to earn something that was entirely her own. I understood that. The phone calls were short at first. Weather, work. Her apartment needed new curtains. She couldn't decide on a color. Safe things. Then in December, she called on a Tuesday evening and talked for 40 minutes about a difficult client situation. And I realized at some point I had stopped keeping track of the time. In February, a letter arrived, 6 handwritten pages. She said she had spent months trying to understand when it started. The feeling of being beside the thing I loved rather than inside it. She wrote that Troy had known exactly what to do with that feeling. He had found the crack that was already there and built his whole plan inside it. She wrote, "He told me I was the one who really kept things running. He told me you'd had your time, and now it was mine. And I knew it wasn't right. But some part of me was so hungry to hear it that I let him keep saying it. The thing I cannot forgive myself for is that I almost let him take something from you to pay for my own hunger." I read it at Morris's old desk, in the room where we used to do the books together on Sunday nights, and I cried for a long time. I wrote back 4 pages. I told her she had not been invisible. I told her I had looked up from the work 1,000 times to find her already back at her desk, already out the door, already on to the next thing, and I had thought, good, she doesn't need me hovering. I had called that independence. She had called it distance. We had been describing the same thing from opposite sides of a wall neither of us had built on purpose. I wrote, "Your father always watched the way people watched each other. I was always watching the numbers. We needed both. I just didn't know it until you weren't there to tell me." I mailed it on a Thursday. She called that Sunday. We talked for nearly 2 hours. About Morris, about the company, about small things, a book she was reading, the way Atlanta light hits differently in winter than Nashville light does. In March, Floyd retired. I promoted 2 people from inside and brought in 1 careful outside hire. Revenue for the first quarter was up. We recovered 4 of the 9 diverted accounts. 2 others called on their own, without being asked, and apologized. Glynis Fowler sent a small arrangement to the office in January with a card that said only, "Glad you locked the door." I kept it on my desk. 1 year after the night at Oleander, I drove to Atlanta. She had suggested it, said there was a restaurant she wanted me to try, a place with good cornbread and decent wine, and no particular associations. Said she wasn't ready to come home yet, but maybe I could come to her. She was waiting on the sidewalk when I pulled up. Jeans and a yellow sweater, hair shorter than I remembered. She looked more like herself than she had in 2 years. She saw my car and raised her hand. I parked, I got out. We met on the sidewalk and held on without saying anything, the Atlanta traffic moving past us in both directions, ordinary and indifferent. We went inside. We ordered too much food. We talked about Morris, about the company, about whether she liked her new neighborhood, about a coworker who reminded her of Minnie in the best possible way. We didn't fix everything over that lunch. Some things don't work that way, and we both knew it. But we sat across from each other in a corner booth in a city that wasn't home yet and would be someday. And we talked the way people talk when they have been through something hard and come out the other side, still choosing each other. When the check came, she reached for it first. I let her. Sometimes that's what second chances look like. Not a grand speech or a perfect ending. Just a hand reaching across a table and the grace to let it land.